everyone, Richard here at Calvin Wazoo, and it's time for another Jazz Monday. This is episode 14, and we're talking about Miles Davis. So I got everything in this one episode, but it's not a whole lot of records, but more than what I've normally done in these videos. We'll try and go through it quickly, but sufficiently pay attention to the importance of Miles Davis. I mean, what you heard in the opening sequence, the 3 needle drops, the first one was from Bag's Groove called Airegin, which I'll mention again later. And then the second one is Dinner au Motel, or could be Diner au Motel, from the soundtrack to the film Ascenseur pour le Scaffold. Hope my French isn't too bad there. And then the last one was from the title track, In a Silent Way, from the album In a Silent Way. So yeah, we'll get started here in chronological order with the releases that I have. And the first one here is Birth of the Cool. All right, this is a 1957 release. My copy is a 2016 mono reissue. And it is so titled because this was cool jazz. This is like maybe the first time Miles Davis has changed music, changed jazz music in particular. He has said himself that he's, kind of in an offhand way, I've changed jazz music 5 or 6 times. Yeah, he really is absolutely amazing in that. And that's why I really, really enjoy Miles Davis. I mean, I've got my favorite session leaders and musicians, from their playing ability, and Miles Davis, I'm not saying is not a great player, he is, but he was so much more than that in terms of the sessions that he led and the concepts, the musical concepts and themes and variances, the way he was willing to go into new directions, new territory, try something different. And what he tried, everybody else caught on and followed suit. So this record is taken from 3 sessions that were recorded in 1949 and 1950. So the first session, they're all listed here on the back. The session 1 tracks, though, are, each have different tracks. The first session is from January 21st, 1949, and it includes the tracks Move, Heru or Jeru, Budo, Godchild. And then session 2 was from April 22nd, 1949, includes the tracks Venus de Milo, Baplicity, Israel, and Rouge. And then the third session, we've got the tracks Moon Dreams, Deception, and Rocker. Those were recorded March 9th, 1950. So, and of course, the session players changed. So, in the January 21, 1949 session, besides Miles on trumpet, we've got Kai Winding on trombone, Junior Collins on French horn. I mean, you don't get a lot of jazz sessions with French horn. Or John Barber on tuba, Lee Konitz on alto sax, Jerry Mulligan on baritone sax, Al Haig on piano, Joe Schulman on bass, and Max Roach, who had played a lot with Miles, on drums. Then the other session, you've got Davis again, trumpet, but we have J.J. Johnson on trombone, Sandy Siegelstein on French horn, John Barber tuba, Lee Konitz alto sax, Jerry Mulligan baritone sax, John Lewis piano, Nelson Boyd on bass, and Kenny Clark on drums. And then the third session from the 1950 Besides Miles, we have J.J. Johnson again on trombone, Gunther Schuller on French horn, John Barber on tuba, Lee Konitz again on alto sax, Jerry Mulligan on baritone sax, Al McKibben on bass, and Max Roach on drums. So Budo is a Davis composition, and it's, one of my favorite ones on here. It's very bopping, and what we get is very much a sort of a modal bop style of jazz in which the solos are quite short. Deception is another Miles Davis composition. This is probably, I would say it's in my top albums, Miles Davis albums. I really enjoy this one. I got it on CD also. But yes, Birth of the Cool. So this is at least the first time he's changed music. Quite possibly it might have been a second time that he's changed music. Moving on to so that was 1957, but also in 1957, but later in the year, released later in the year, I believe, is this one here, Beg's Groove. So this is really, really incredible album. I mean, this was released before, one of Miles Davis's absolutely biggest albums ever, one of the biggest albums in jazz ever. And this one is just really, really up there. Don't overlook it. This is just, like I say, absolutely incredible. There's 2 sessions here. We've got a Christmas Eve session in 1954. It's got Milt Jackson on vibes. I mean, Milt Jackson on vibes on this record is just stunning. And then you got Thelonious Monk on piano, and there's some legend about this Christmas Eve recording with Thelonious Monk. I don't know the story. I'll have to check that out. Percy Heath on bass and Kenny Clark on drums. And then the second session, which was actually earlier in the year, June 29th, in 1954, we got Sonny Rollins on tenor sax, Horace Silver on piano, Percy Heath on bass, and Kenny Clark on drums. The song that I played at the start, Airegin, is actually a name of a country spelled backwards, Nigeria. Oleo is another great song, a little more, not quite as boppy, maybe, as Airegin. It's very, a lot of his muted trumpet playing on here. But yeah, and then the song Doxy on here has definite funk groove to it, or the character of the song. Really, really amazing album. Mine's a repress on this clear blue vinyl. They say it's translucent blue. I'm sorry, it's clear. You can see through it. Translucent means light passes through, but you can't see through it. Okay? It's clear. Just want to get that off my chest, all right? Really hate the mislabeling of translucent versus clear. Anyway, Beg's Groove. Don't know exactly when my copy was reissued. It was in the 2000 teens somewhere, I think. But anyway, great record. All right, then we come to, another just absolutely amazing recording. And that is this soundtrack for the French film Ascenseur pour le Scaffold, Lift to the Scaffold. If you haven't watched this film, it's an absolutely brilliant, brilliant film. So yes, this was from 1958. My copy is a 2010 repress. And this is an incredible soundscape, incredible mood in this recording. And the interesting thing and how this soundtrack was recorded and how it came to be, Miles Davis was approached by the filmmakers on doing this. He was doing a tenure there in Paris at a club. I think it was Café Saint-Germain. I'm not sure which one he was doing, like a residency. Anyway, so the musicians, all right, let's go, let me fill you in on who the musicians are. We've got Miles Davis on trumpet. We've got Barney Willen on tenor sax. René Outreger, sorry about the mispronunciation, on piano. Pierre Michelot on bass, and Kenny Clark on drums. So Davis was the only person in this band, this this quintet, that actually saw the film before they did the recording. So after screening the film, he jotted down some ideas in his hotel at night. Then they go into the recording studio, the recording session. The other musicians had no preparation other than whatever harmonic concepts Miles Davis brought from his notes into that. And then they played the film on a screen, and they improvised everything right from that. I think there were 2 takes. And that's pretty much it. And I think they pretty much used everything that was in the first take. So they knew the plot. The plot was explained to the musicians, and then they would just watch the relevant scenes that they were to, on the spot, improvise for that. So yeah, you really, if you haven't ever watched this film, it is an amazing film, and it is an amazing soundtrack. Well then, so that was 1958. And if I hadn't mentioned, I said, my copy is a 2010 repress. Then in 1959, we get probably one of the masterpieces that Miles Davis released, and that is Kind of Blue. My copy is a 2013 limited remastered mono version. This is a modal jazz classic. It is probably, when it comes to jazz records, the tunes on here are immediately recognizable. Oh yeah, that's from Kind of Blue. That's Freddie the Freeloader. Or Freddie Freeloader, I mean. That's a So What. You hear it, and it's just absolutely incredible music. It is truly a masterpiece, and it's at least his second time, maybe third time, where again he is changing jazz music. This was a shift. I mean, there's nothing I can add that probably hasn't already been said. But like I say, it's just this incredible mood that is being presented and nurtured in this recording. Again, it's like very few takes, because Miles and other, jazz musicians understood that you either get it in the first or second take, or you're not going to get it at all. And this is significant to keep in mind as we go into other recordings, later recordings. But that's pretty much how a lot of jazz was recorded. It was the first take was used, and sometimes they would do a second take, and they'd still go back and use the first one, or sometimes they'd use the second one. If they were going to a third take, it was like, the musicians generally had lost it, what was going on with the music, so they hardly ever did third takes or even used them, let alone use them. Okay, so then coming up in 1960 is something really, really different, and that is Sketches of Spain. This is a 2012 mono reissue. So these are all arrangements by Gil Evans. And Gil Evans and Miles Davis, they collaborated together a lot. And so Miles is bringing his jazz chops to these Spanish orchestrations. And it is very, very different. So like before I was saying, they generally do the first take, and that's what they that's what goes on the record. Sometimes they'll do a second, and sometimes that second will go on the record. But in this case, Gil Evans knew what he wanted. So he's creating these arrangements. He's got this orchestra, and he's got Miles Davis, front and center, but they're going to do multiple takes, to get it to sound, especially with the orchestra and the other musicians in the background, to make sure that they're sounding the way, that Gil Evans wanted them to sound. The opening track is Concierto de Aranjuez, I think, and that was originally a piece that was scored for guitar and orchestra. It's very quiet, very restrained. Miles' playing is just really, really incredible. And so this arrangement, Gil Evans did so that Miles, rather than being for guitar and orchestra, it was Miles, trumpet, and other jazz musicians. So yeah, a lot of these took several takes, which was very uncommon, but that's because Gil Evans, he knew what he wanted, and he was going to get what he wanted. Side 2 is more folk tunes, and there's a religious piece in there. In fact, I think one of them, the religious piece in particular, is actually a vocal piece that Gil Evans created the arrangement for the musicians to play. The song Will-O-the-Wisp, which is from side 1, has very much Miles's signature muted trumpet. The Spanish flavor throughout, it comes through with this feel of Andalusia, especially with the song The Pan Piper. So you've got that Spanish feel, but with the Andalusian influence, you're getting that Turkish influence, in the Iberian culture and presentation of the music. And his Miles Davis on his trumpet it's amazing. He gets these, it's not like slurring his playing, but it's like he's turning his trumpet into a slide whistle, which is just really incredible how he does that. All right, and then the next one I have, this is another one that people really don't talk very much about. I think, at least I don't see them talk very much about it. And that's this 1967 release. I still got the shrink wrap on it. But my copy is a 2014 reissue, Miles Smiles. So we've got the quintet, with Wayne Shorter on tenor sax, Herbie Hancock on piano, Ron Carter on drums, and Ron Carter on bass, and then Tony Williams on drums. We also have Teo Macero producing. He was also the producer for the previous record, which I don't have, Sorcerer. But things are taking shape on Miles Smiles. And we're getting hints of the direction that Miles is going to start going with his next releases. All right, so he's letting on what's going on in his mind musically. And it's interesting that many of these players are the ones who stuck with him when we start getting into the fusion era. So this opens with the song Orbits, which is a very modal free jazz piece. But then it's followed by a much more subdued circle. And the Shorter's and Hancock's solos are just really, really beautiful. And then the closing song for side one, Footprints, is it's gentle and it's lilting. And it really made me think of swallows swooping and diving in the sky. I mean, I live very close to Lake Michigan, and a lot of swallows around. We got purple martins, we got tree swallows, we've got bank swallows, we've got cliff swallows. Every once in a while, I'll see some barn swallows, and it's amazing, especially when there's a midge hatch going on, watching the swallows just fly and dance in the air. It's just, swallows are a bird. When you watch them fly, you can get this feeling of them really liking it, really enjoying flight. And that feeling really comes through with the song Footprints. On the other side, we've got the opening with the song Dolores, which Miles is just blistering on that. And Williams on drums is like super, super fantastic. And he sets the pace clearly with the next song, Freedom Jazz Dance. Something, this is a good record to talk about the difference between a jazz drummer and a rock drummer. Okay, rock drummers tend to not use very much cymbal, more for punctuation and emphasis. In addition to the snare, they also really use a lot of the toms and the bass drum, all right? In jazz drumming, it's like 80%. Now, this is a generalization. It's all, it's always different, but it's like 80%, it's happening with the cymbals and the hi-hat, and then some with the fills, which are sparse, are mostly just on the snare. And then, during a solo or something like that, you'll get more of the toms and more of the bass drum. But yeah, it's definitely the rhythm and the timekeeping is done with the cymbal and hi-hat. And this is a really good record to really exemplify that. Then the closing song, Gingerbread Boy, is you've got Miles Davis and Wayne Shorter. They start together in very, very tight unison, and then come these like frenetic solos. And Ron Carter's bass playing is absolutely maniacal through all of it. I mean, really listen to his bass playing on this record, especially on that song Gingerbread Boy. Really incredible. Now, all right, the next one is, I said he was kind of, setting with Miles Smiles, he was kind of setting the direction, letting you know where they were going. And then that really started to take shape with this one, In a Silent Way, which is from 1969. And my copy is the 2012 MOFI release. This is the true beginning of fusion. And it just blows me away on here. I mean, there are 3 people on here playing electric piano. You got Herbie Hancock, you got Chick Corea, and you got Joseph Zawinul. Yeah, I'm always butchering that name. And of course, you've got John McLaughlin, on guitar. His guitar work on here is just absolutely astonishingly brilliant. You've got Teo Macero again doing production. And yeah, the pieces are spliced. The recording is spliced together, okay? I mean, you can hear it with the recording that how they kind of end abruptly. I mean, there are some long jams going on here. And Mateo is, splicing things together to sort of weave this sound tapestry. And it's still, despite that, not being like earlier modal jazz or earlier bop where, you did a take, and then that was what you went with. Yeah, these things are spliced together. The songs don't necessarily start also with a musical theme. Rather, the theme sometimes, not even at all, will come in later after all these various musical explorations that the players go through. And it's just, It just really, really brings you in. The opening of In a Silent Way is McLaughlin's guitar playing, I think, was very influential on Peter Green's guitar playing at the time. This came out, I believe it was in June of '69, and then Fleetwood Mac's Then Play On came out in September of '69, I think. But, you go back to Then Play On and listen to the song Underway, all right? And compare that with what McLaughlin is doing with the title song In a Silent Way. I mean, the guitar style of playing, everybody, the cat was out of the bag, but other, people were playing with these other styles of presenting whatever instrument that they were doing. There was a lot of really cool and great experimentation going on in music, but that was largely prompted by what was going on in the jazz world. Now, of course, you can't talk about fusion without bringing up this, Bitches Brew. Now, I have this on CD. I don't have it on vinyl. And, normally I haven't been talking about what jazz releases I have on CD. But this is one that I'm probably not ever going to get on vinyl, because I like the ability of taking the two CDs here and putting them in my CD changer, and then I don't have to get up and flip records and just kind of go with it. Again, this is not a series of long jams, but long jams that are spliced together. Again, Teo Macero, doing that and coming out with the record. This is a challenge. I don't want to necessarily say challenging, but I do know that there are a lot of people who have difficulty with this record, and it's not your typically what you would think of jazz fusion. I mean, Miles is really going out there, and all the players that are on here are really going out there. I mean, you've got all the people that I was talking about before, like, Chick Corea, and Wayne Shorter, and Herbie Hancock, and others. I do feel, though, that In a Silent Way is the easier listen, the more enjoyable listen. Not to diminish this. This is a fantastic and powerful recording. But I'm going to be listening to this a lot more frequently than I will be listening to this. But it is absolutely fantastic and brilliant. So yeah, these are the records that I have with Miles Davis. Another CD compilation that's worth checking out is this one here, Miles and Coltrane. So there's some great pieces on here, like Straight No Chaser and Budo, that from various recordings. So this was a compilation that I think was released in 1988 on CD. And Coltrane and Davis did play together. So yeah, it's definitely a good CD to pick up, is kind of a sampler. Hey, there are many other Miles Davis records that I need to get, and I know that, but I sure would appreciate y'all giving me some recommendations on some of the other good ones. I mean, I think that there are plenty of good ones that I would have to go back and I've lost my page where I had all the different releases, but the ones there, there are some on my checklist, so to speak. But leave a comment in the Down Under and share your own experiences and thoughts with collecting Miles Davis or listening to Miles Davis, and all the different ways that he influenced primarily jazz music, but he influenced music in general, popular music in general. I mean, out of Bitches Brew and that whole jazz fusion, you've got, great player. Herbie Hancock went in some new directions. Chick Corea went into new directions. John McLaughlin went into new directions. But I think the band, the group, Jazz Fusion, that really took what happened, especially from Bitches Brew, was Weather Report. They carried that fusion torch like, to me, no other band did. I'm starting to kind of ramble here. We're on past 30 minutes here. So, remember that you can find me on Instagram as NewsDude76. That's NEWZDUDE76. I have a Facebook page. It's also called Kelvin Wazoo. And, remember to pray for the people inside your head, for they're not going to be there when you're dead.